at, just in current dollar prices, $5.25 in 2000 is about $10 now.
Yeah.
And nobody's getting $10, so we're continually saying in order to make money, you've got to reduce costs.
The criticism of the leadership, too many dairy farmers in the world, Stuart, and Russian self-sufficiency, whether that works or not, being developed with Chinese assistance and the Chinese trying for a version of that themselves, and subsidies and big producers. The question is, why didn't anyone see this coming? Where are the smarts?
Oh, I think we only live in the university and nobody takes us seriously, Jim. I mean, you quoted me from something I said back at Field Days a few years ago. I think we have been seeing this coming.
But they don't pay you $1 million a year to do it, do they?
No, but my Vice-Chancellor's name is Neil Quigley, and if you just email me...
I'll drop him an email,
No, you can make a suggestion for me. So, seriously, I think we have seen this coming, and that model of trying to reduce costs all the time isn't the sustainable way to go. I heard what the chairperson said today about, they had more milk going into, value-added commodities.
Yeah.
But when you look through the accounts, it's not making a big difference. We've been talking about value add for years and years, but all we really do is produce more milk powder. The value add is very much at the margin.
Yeah, and make it into UHT, a lot of it in China as well. Can Fonterra win back that privileged position in China, Stuart? I mean, the question is really about what is the outlook now?
Yeah, well, I think again that you got to look at that in the broader political economy of what China's doing. We're a small player, and we have a seat on the Security Council. How we behave in relation to their islands and in the South China Sea, and all those sort of things are going to make a big difference to how China wants to see us. And it's not just a matter of consumer confidence when you've got a state-owned press that can run stories for New Zealand or against New Zealand at any point in time.
Yes, exactly. Good to talk with you, and thank you for coming on. That's Professor Stuart Locke, and Teo Spearings just reminding you is on with John Campbell on Checkpoint after 5 o'clock. A couple of things to ask you about before 5 o'clock. The Prime Minister's coming under pressure to disclose how much taxpayer money was spent on legal costs in the Teapot Tapes defamation case. And this is actually up to Parliamentary Services, apparently, to disclose how much was spent, but it won't. Do you see any reason whatsoever why we shouldn't know how much the Bradley Ambrose Teapot Tape saga has cost us?
No, I don't.
No,
I think
I don't either.
if we are saying that it is the taxpayers who have funded the court case, then we should be allowed to know what we...
If it was any other government department, then under the Act they would have to provide the information. So it's just Parliamentary Services which is exempt from this. And, I mean, it's foodling, isn't it? How much this costs?
You'd quite like to know, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but, I mean, we're not talking about a game changer. This isn't going to bring down the government or...
It's not as much as a flag referendum, Max. It may soon be, just before we go, it may soon be illegal to text and walk in New Jersey. A measure introduced into the legislature would see $50 fines, 15 days in jail, or both. They've already got an interesting distracted driver ban. And this is, as it says, you couldn't walk along the street and text at the same time. Do we need more rules like this?
No. The Darwin principle will work. People who walk and text get run over.
That's a very harsh view of it.
People who drive and talk on cell phones run over other people. That's why we've got a rule stopping them.
Right. Okay, that's the Max Ritchie point of view on
a nice note to end on, Jim.
Max, thank you for your company today. And Dame Diane Robertson on the panel. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
Nice to see you both again. Checkpoint is coming up. Thank you, everybody, and we'll be back with the last panel of the week before Easter tomorrow.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell. On behalf of the Checkpoint team, thank you for joining us. Tonight, Brussels, at least 31 people dead, over 200 injured as another European city suffers a devastating blow. We're there and we talk to a journalist who takes us inside the neighbourhood where many of those behind the Paris and Brussels attacks are believed to be from. Fonterra, its profit has more than doubled. Good news for shareholders, but most are farmers too. And will it be enough for them? Teo Spearings will be with us here in the studio very shortly. The 1080 blackmailer gets 8.5 years. We have reaction to that, and the All Blacks win 3 from 3 in the T20 World Cup. All of that and much more coming up in the next 90 minutes. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. It's nearly dawn in Brussels, but mourners are still keeping a vigil at a makeshift memorial in the Place de la Bourse, a square in the ancient heart of the city. Brussels is still in shock from the bomb attacks yesterday that left more than 30 people dead and dozens injured. Earlier, the Belgian Prime Minister, Charles Michel, joined the vigil as night fell, saying Belgium would not be cowed by the attacks. The BBC's Lucy Williamson reports.
As the night has worn on, more people have come here to this square to light candles and chalk their messages on the ground in front of the stock exchange. And one thing that's really striking when you read these messages is just how many languages people are expressing their emotions in. Italian, German, English, Arabic. President Hollande of France said this morning that this attack hit the whole of Europe, and it feels as if the whole of Europe is represented here in this square tonight.
Lucy Williamson. In the United States, the Republican Party's presidential frontrunner, Donald Trump, is calling for America to go back to using torture, such as waterboarding and other harsh interrogation techniques when questioning terror suspects. Following the attacks in Brussels, he has renewed his call for tougher US border security. He says the authorities should be able to do whatever they have to do to get information and, quote, waterboarding would be fine if the law can be changed. Waterboarding or pouring water over someone's face to simulate drowning was banned by President Barack Obama in 2009. In the presidential race, Mr. Trump and the Democratic Party frontrunner Hillary Clinton have swept to victory in the latest primary vote in the state of Arizona. Mr. Trump easily defeated his two rivals for the Republican nomination, Ted Cruz and John Kasich, while Mrs. Clinton routed Bernie Sanders. The Prime Minister, John Campbell, says Fonterra's strong result shows it can pay its suppliers on time. The country's largest company made $409 million in the 6 months to the end of January, compared with $183 million in the same period a year ago, an increase of more than 120%. Earlier this month, it controversially extended from 30 days to 90 the time it takes to pay firms that supply it with goods and services. Mr. Key says Fonterra is using its strong balance sheet to support farmers through dividends, but it should also deliver to contractors.
It's further evidence that they should do what they say they're doing, which is paying their vendors on time, because you can't deliver a result like that and not follow through and make sure that people are paid on time.
John Key. Fonterra's chairman, John Wilson, admits it handled the matter badly, but says it will not back down. The Ministry for Primary Industries says a threat to spike infant formula with 1080 poison in 2014 was a threat against some of the most vulnerable people in society, babies. In the High Court in Auckland today, Jeremy Hamish Kerr was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison for trying to blackmail Fonterra and Federated Farmers. Speaking outside court, the ministry's Deputy Director General Scott Gallagher says that put a lot of people, including parents, under stress. He says, though, that what followed enhanced New Zealand's reputation as an open and transparent society.
We pulled together one of the most effective responses in the history of our food safety system to a criminal blackmail threat. And everything that we've heard from that time has been overseas markets and consumers have more confidence in what we say.
Scott Gallagher says consumers can continue to have confidence in New Zealand products. The Auckland City Mission says it's facing a hole of $100,000 in its funding because of an unprecedented demand for food parcels. In the year to the end of June 2015, it handed out nearly 11,000 parcels, but its acting chief executive says that figure has already been exceeded in the first 8 months of the current financial year. Jackie Richardson says the mission is on track to provide 50% more parcels this year compared to last year. To sport, and the Rugby Sevens tournament is set to stay in the capital. The New Zealand Rugby Union has an agreement to run it until 2019, but Wellington's role as host city expired this year, and after poor ticket sales last month, the location for the next 2 years was up for grabs. However, RNZ News has been told Wellington will keep the Sevens, although the decision has not been confirmed by the NZRU or the City Council. The Pakistan cricket coach Waqar Younis has praised New Zealand's bowling effort, but has lamented his side's poor batting after being beaten by 22 runs in their 2020 World Cup game in Mohali this morning. New Zealand made 180 for 5 and then restricted their opponents to 158 for 5. Pakistan got off to a flying start, but Younis says things fell apart after that.
In the middle, I think batsmen, they couldn't find the boundaries where I thought the boundaries were important. Because in the last maybe 10 overs, only 2 boundaries and a 6, maybe a freebie, it did. None other could really cross that boundary.
Waqar Younis. New Zealand's final pool game is against Bangladesh this weekend, but with 3 wins from 3, they've already become the first side to reach the semi-finals. 2 New Zealand cyclists are sticking with their plans to race in Belgium, though they acknowledge security concerns in the wake of the Brussels terror attacks. Sam Bewley, who arrived in Brussels airport 2 days ago, is now staying in the nearby city of Ghent. He's preparing for races including the 100th edition of the Tour de Flanders, which starts on Monday. Fellow New Zealander Shane Archbold is also competing. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, just in case you thought the current surrealism surrounding American politics is a new phenomenon, Tom A.G., former US advertising executive, until he decided to get out during the Nixon years, talking about how he helped another Republican get into the Senate, one William Scott, later described as the laziest politician ever to work on Capitol Hill. Tom recalls his glorious campaign from the safety of our studio on Nights after the news at 7. On RNZ National.
Met Service weather now through to midnight tomorrow, and there's a severe weather warning for northern and western parts of New Zealand. The upper North Island, that's from Taranaki across to Taupo and Bay of Plenty northwards. Rain with heavy falls spreading from the north later today or overnight. A risk of thunderstorms and localised downpours tomorrow, easing from the west. Northeast gales today, severe in exposed places, easing tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered rain in Gisborne, spreading south overnight, rain becoming widespread and heavier tomorrow afternoon. Whanganui to Wellington also wided upper. Few spots of rain becoming widespread and heavier overnight, then easing to showers and fine breaks tomorrow morning. Northerly gales overnight. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland. Rain with heavy falls, possible downpours easing tomorrow. Canterbury, Otago and Southland scattered showers, some possibly heavy with hail in Canterbury tomorrow afternoon, clearing Southland and Otago later. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's 5:08.
Thanks very much indeed, Katrina. We do begin tonight with the terror attacks in Brussels that killed at least 30 people and sent shockwaves around Europe and the world. Tao Spearings, by the way, is joining us in about 10 or 15 minutes to discuss the Fonterra result. But the blasts at Brussels Airport and the Maalbeek metro station during the morning rush hour also injured more than 200 people. They came just days after the celebrated arrest of one of the masterminds behind the Paris terror attacks. In an online statement, ISIS claimed responsibility for the attacks. World leaders have been quick to condemn them, of course, and heightened security around European cities. And a manhunt is on for one suspect Belgian police believe survived the bombings. Tonight we're live in Brussels, we'll have New Zealand reaction, and we'll talk about Molenbeek, the small Belgian suburb. Many of those behind the attacks in both Paris and Brussels are believed to have come from. But first, our reporter Alex Ashton begins with how the attacks unfolded and how the world reacted.
The eyes of the world are on one man. Captured on CCTV footage inside Zaventem Airport, the man's accompanied by 2 others. He wears a white jacket and black hat as he pushes an airport trolley.
Une photo A photograph of 3 male suspects was taken at Zaventem. 2 of them seem to have committed suicide attacks. The third, wearing a light-colored jacket and a hat, is actively being sought.
The airport blast killed at least 11, injured 100, and sent hundreds fleeing for their lives. Just an hour later, a second attack. Another bomb went off at the Malbec metro station, killing 20 more and injuring more than 130.
I'm so scared. I feel like it's the end of the world.
This woman fled the airport running along the motorway. She was in an airport bathroom.
I heard an explosion and all the ceilings is going down. And then I just go under the sink, and then the second explosion went, and then everything is black.
As Belgian police continued their manhunt for the suspect in the white jacket, French President François Hollande spoke about the link to the Paris terror attacks last November, which killed 130.
We need to realise the extent and gravity of this terrorist threat. These attacks follow others. Paris was particularly targeted last year.
Paris a été particulièrement ciblé l'année dernière. Nous sommes devant
We are facing a global threat which demands a global response. France and Belgium are connected by horror. We once again share it. And I express to the Belgian government our indispensable support so we can bring them all the means necessary.
World leaders joined the chorus condemning ISIS, who overnight claimed responsibility. Speaking from Cuba, US President Barack Obama vowed to help Belgium bring those responsible to justice.
And this is yet another reminder that the world must unite. We must be together, regardless of nationality or race or faith, in fighting against the scourge of terrorism. We can and we will defeat those who threaten the safety and security of people all around the world.
In the United States, the House of Representatives held a minute's silence.
The chair would ask all present to rise for the purpose of a moment of silence. The chair asks that the House now observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the terrorist attacks in Brussels.
Three Mormon missionaries from Utah and a US Air Force member and his family were among the Americans injured in the deadly bomb attacks. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio promised an increased police presence across airports and subways across the city in light of the attacks.
Expect to see extraordinary NYPD presence out over the coming days as a sign of our readiness to protect people at all times.
Security was also stepped up in London. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, David Cameron, says extra police were brought in to patrol key transport hubs.
I've chaired a meeting of COBRA here in London to make sure that we're doing everything we can to enhance our own security, and there'll be increased police presence at ports, airports, underground stations and international railway stations, as you'd expect. But these are difficult times, these are appalling terrorists, but we must stand together to do everything we can to stop them and to make sure that although they attack our way of life and they attack us because of who we are, we will never let them win.
Republican presidential candidate Senator Ted Cruz offered his condolences to the victims in Brussels, saying the attacks were a war on Europe.
Today's attacks in Brussels underscores that this is a war. This is not an isolated incident. This is not a lone wolf. This is a war with radical Islamic terrorism. ISIS has declared jihad on Europe and on the United States of America.
Mr. Cruz's Democratic counterpart, Hillary Clinton, said the test for world leaders was keeping its citizens safe.
When I think about what we have to do, I see the challenge ahead as one where we're bringing the world together, where we are leading the world against these terrorist networks.
Meanwhile, at the Greece-Macedonia border, more than 12,000 refugees stranded in no man's land expressed their sympathy for the victims of the Brussels attacks. Children, mainly from Syria, Iraq, Pakistan and Afghanistan, stood with handmade signs written with English slogans, which read, "I hate ISIS" and "Sorry for Brussels." The Syrian refugee said he knew what the people of Brussels were going through.
Everybody here, they feel sorry about what happened in Brussels. You know, we left our countries, our hometowns because of the same reason, because of ISIS, because of the suicide bombers.
They said the attacks would also make it harder for them to have hopes of new lives in Europe.
What's happened today in Belgium, it's so bad for us, especially. Maybe they will be more afraid of us. They will make things harder for people here. People here have nothing to lose. They can't come back.
As night fell in Brussels, Belgians gathered in Place de la Bourse Square to pay tribute to the victims of the early morning terror attacks.
It honestly really hasn't sank in yet for me personally, because I never really believed that something could happen here in Brussels, but yeah, it's clearly here.
It's a sad day for us. Brussels is a fantastic place, and I don't want anyone to destroy this beauty that we live with here.
In Paris, City Hall was decked with Belgian flags and a moment of silence was held for the victims. The Eiffel Tower was lit in the colours of Belgium's flag, black, yellow and red, and in Germany, the famous Brandenburg Gate, a long-time symbol of European peace and unity, was also lit up in Belgium's colours. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
What's the matter with Belgium? That was the headline on an article in The Atlantic last November. Its author, David A. Graham, now staff writer for The Atlantic, formerly of Newsweek and The Wall Street Journal, looked inside the neighbourhood of Molenbeek. Now, neighbourhood implies it's small. In fact, its population approaches roughly 100,000 people. Although it's a more mixed community than is commonly suggested, it has been the source for many of the individuals behind the attacks in Paris and, it seems, also in Brussels. David A. Graham identifies the dual input of immigrants who are poor and isolated from the dominant culture on the one side, and far-right anti-immigration parties loudly declaring a Muslim menace on the other side, creating alienation and vilification and breeding radicalisation, meaning the attacks weren't a surprise.
There seems to be an inevitability about some level of terrorism in Belgium. You have all the right ingredients, as you say. There's both this alienated community, fairly low income, high unemployment in Muslim communities, low assimilation, and then these parties that oppose them. You also have a weak state that's really overtaxed on its terrorism abilities. And so the combination of all those things makes some level of terrorism probably inevitable.
You say Belgian jihadism is concentrated in Molenbeek. Can you tell me about that community?
Sure. So Molenbeek is a region of the capital that has a heavy Muslim population. It's not exclusively Muslim. It's a sort of artistic district. It's gentrifying as well, but you have a lot of immigrant families there. Unemployment is high. There's not a great deal of government services, and so you have a large number of disaffected people. There's also historically been some sort of avatars of Islamism, particularly a guy named Fouad Belkacem, who have helped to spread, various radical concepts in the area, and have recruited people who have then gone on to commit crimes, including the Paris attacks and possibly the attacks today.
And so the combination of people who are alienated and available for radicalisation has proved very potent there, but there also seems to have been a failure on the ground by the Belgian authorities. Have they been working in this community to kind of de-radicalise?
There's some question about how they should be doing that and whether they've done enough. There are questions about the government services, and the more law and order types will argue, well, the police haven't done enough. The government has been too soft on Islamism. Others argue what we need is not a stick, but more of a carrot. We need to go in and we need to provide better services. So, within Belgium, you'll get disagreements about that. But I think there's no question that the government will do more in the neighborhood now, and has been trying to do that really since November.
And of course there will be the growth of Islamophobia, the increasing alienisation and marginalisation of people who are simply innocent Muslims going about their business, which leads to further radicalisation and, in a perverse kind of way, a form of recruitment for ISIS, right?
That's right. I mean, one of the interesting things I think we see in these Belgian Islamists is many of them come from a background of sort of petty crime, or they like to drink, or they like to smoke marijuana. It's not people who came up through a devout family. They at some point in their adolescence or their early adulthood, they kind of radicalized and became suddenly very devout Muslims or very devout jihadists. And so you see the ways in which this alienation and lack of economic opportunity seems to drive them in this direction.
And so, are things going to get worse before they get better?
That's a great question. That's the $64,000 question, I suppose. I think you're right that there will be a greater crackdown, and the question is what sort of short-term effect that has in terms of guaranteeing security versus what sort of long-term plans the Belgian government can lay to try to fight the root causes as well as the violence itself.
David A. Graham from The Atlantic. New Zealanders in Brussels, some of whom live just minutes away from the blasts or work near where the blasts were, say emotions there are running high, perhaps inevitably. And for Belgians here on the other side of the world, there's an anxious hour-by-hour wait. For more information on the attacks, Kim Baker-Wilson reports.
For Elisabeth Jacobs, Belgium's honorary consul, here the blasts in Brussels came as a gut-churning shock.
I haven't been able to go into work this morning because I cannot concentrate on anything else, really.
She says New Zealand's small, tight-knit Belgian community has been trying to get in touch with loved ones, but it's been difficult.
I've been able to ascertain that all the family and the friends are okay. It has been very difficult to get through at times because all the networks, the cell phone networks, weren't functioning properly. And we are all in shock, and people say it was inevitable. Yes, but then when it happens, it is still very, very shocking. And we will be waiting and seeing what happens in the days to come.
New Zealand's ambassador to the European Union, David Taylor, urged New Zealanders in Belgium to be vigilant. One of them, Andrew Burton, has been in Brussels for 10 years and lives just 5 minutes from the airport.
At various train stations and bus stops in the village, traffic has been either completely stopped or they've been bringing various buses through, dropping people off and picking people up, and just trying to find places to put all of the displaced people from the airport. Yeah, it's fairly dramatic.
It's also been dramatic for his friends elsewhere.
I've had 3 friends who were actually on the metro and got stopped just before mail day because they were there just about at the right time, and so many close calls right through the day as you start hearing where different people were.
Another New Zealander, Paul Culliford, lives just blocks away from the Malbeek metro station.
Quite a scary thought that happens somewhere that I go so often. I guess you never think something like that would happen somewhere so close to where you live and work and go about your daily life.
The Prime Minister John Key has condemned the attacks.
They are an act for which New Zealanders will feel appalled by the fact that you've got people going into an airport and taking away the lives of people who are doing nothing more than travelling on an aeroplane somewhere to maybe see family or friends.
He says New Zealanders thinking of doing the same are now being warned not to.
The one thing we have done is raised our threat assessment and therefore the risk of travel advisory of people going to Brussels. That's now lifted to a high security assessment. That means for all non-essential and tourist travel, we strongly suggest people don't go.
More than 70 New Zealanders are registered as being in Belgium. A message has been sent to all of them, asking them to contact family in New Zealand. For Checkpoint, Kim Baker-Wilson.
And after 6 o'clock, we're going to cross live to Brussels and our correspondent, Jack Parrick. That will be after the news at 6. Well, coming up next, the other big story of the day, very big story in New Zealand. Fonterra doubles its profit. CEO Tao Spearings is live here beside me in the studio, and I'll talk to him in about a minute. You can get in touch with us any way you choose. We love to hear from you. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Don't forget, you can watch us online. We live stream on the RNZ website, and we are hopefully on Freeview Channel 50. 24 minutes past 5 is the time. Normally, a doubling of profit by the country's largest company would be a case of, a cause for unqualified celebration, particularly when 97% of the dividend is paid to New Zealand. But Fonterra is not such a straightforward proposition, if it ever was. The announcement of accelerated dividend payments, welcomed by shareholders and commentators alike, is so keenly sought because most shareholders are also suppliers, and as we know, they've seen the milk price halve in basically 2 years. So Winston Peters has dismissed the dividend as, and I quote, the language of Mr. Key and his city banker mates, and says the real truth is the $3.90 milk price, while John Key welcomes the 120% increase in profit to $409 million, but says that means Fonterra should pay its contractors faster.
Of course, it's been a very, very tough time for dairy farmers. It's a very strong result for Fonterra. At one level, that's good because you want the organisation to be strong. I think what Fonterra are doing, though, is trying to relieve some of that pressure and use their own balance sheet to support those farmers through dividends and the likes. It's further evidence that they should do what they say they're doing, which is paying their vendors on time, because you can't deliver a result like that and not follow through and make sure that people are paid on time.
So that's what the Prime Minister said today. What do the farmers think? Well, perhaps that depends on their debt levels. But Alan Crouch, who milks 500 cows in Tauperi, North Waikato, doesn't believe predictions by Fonterra milk bosses that milk prices will pick up later this year.
No, I don't believe that. I mean, I've been in the industry for 30 years, and we've been hearing things are going to be better next year for many seasons. If you look at the dynamics of the supply and demand, I just don't believe it. It's really still up in the air, a lot of those issues. So, I mean, from my point of view, I just look at it in terms of knowing roughly what I'm going to get, and I want an accurate picture. I don't want like a milk price that's glossed over that's good for the PR or good for the company image. I want a realistic price so that I know where I'm going to go for next season and just being able to budget on that.
So that is a farmer, Alan Crouch. Tao Spearings, welcome to Checkpoint. Welcome to the studio.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you. 123% increase, net profit $409 million. It's good for shareholders, and shareholders are farmers, but is it good enough for them?
It's good for shareholders. It's in the end, it's good for the co-op, so we have a strong co-op, and therefore it's good for New Zealand because dollars being earned and paid in New Zealand, 50% is spent again in the communities. But on your question, is it with the current milk price environment? That's for me, I look at the whole result in two buckets. One is the globally traded arena, which tells us $3.90, and that is harsh.
It's a disaster.
It's harsh. Yep. It's very harsh. And I know there are comments that people think we can make a difference. This is an arena where, yes, we have quite a significant market share, but we don't determine supply and demand in a global context. We don't determine whether there's an embargo in Russia or a Chinese reset of the economy, the quotas being lifted in Europe. So the 390 is tough on farm, but that's something we cannot control. And I prefer to focus on what we can control. And that is really driving our business. And if you look at our ingredient business, in a difficult environment, that's a business more than 600 million returning, 6% volume growth in a very difficult market. That's an outstanding result in any context. Our value-creating business, consumer food service, 1 billion more milk shifted, 1 billion more milk shifted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You talk about not being able to control commodities, and no one can control more commodities, and everyone understands that. I just wonder if you were blunt enough and unsentimental enough in your reminder to people. Let's go back to this time last year and exactly the same report, right? 12 months ago. I quote, dairy markets are always volatile. Good. But then you go on and say, we have accurately predicted growing demand for dairy trade, and that in China, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and areas of the Middle East and Africa, demand will outstrip growth. In other words, you were selling a story that wasn't realistic, that was overly romantic, that was hopeful, and really didn't serve farmers well.
Yeah, but if you look, we can zoom in now on a current imbalance, and definitely there's an imbalance. At that point in time, or the Russian embargo, which is a hit of 3 billion litres of milk in the globally traded arena, I mean, that has its effect as well. Oil prices. So yes, we were optimistic because we look at the facts we have, and consumption of dairy is growing. John, that's the most important. Consumption of dairy. Consumers drink 3% more per year. That is 14 billion more litres per year.
This is empowering language, and it's persuasive language, but it's also language that's led to $38 billion worth of farm debt. Let's look at a headline from New Zealand Farmer yesterday. 35 Southland farms told to sell. Let's go back to February. Federated Farmers. A member poll from Federated Farmers shows that more than 1 in 10 dairy farmers are now under pressure from banks over their mortgage.
There is definite pressure, and we are talking to banks, but we're also, John, we are talking to really strengthening the co-op. And if you see, with our support package of 30 cents, with 20 cents dividend plus 10, that's 70 cents on top of the 90. I know it's still at a low level, and yeah, you are right that forecasting is difficult. Even a weather forecast is difficult, but when you look at our partners or our competitors in Europe, Ireland, Friesland, Campina, in this heavy volatile environment, they have said, guys, we stop forecasting. We have to see what's coming up. And I'm not saying that's right. We have to give an indication for farmers to plan. Yeah, but it is very difficult. If somebody would have said oil prices will go down to less than 30
Absolutely.
A year ago,
Absolutely.
Then
right. So oil prices have fallen out of bed, milk prices have fallen out of bed. I guess the difference is, particularly in the New Zealand context, is that whilst we talk about market forces here in commodities, actually you are a virtual monopoly. You get well over 90% of all the milk that comes out of cows in New Zealand. In other words, the pressure surely is on you to have a greater understanding of market, market forces, and actually a greater ability to protect people against them, because there isn't really a market in New Zealand at all, is there? It's you.
But at the farm gate, you're right. But of course, 95% of what we collect at the farm gate goes into the to the world, right? So the market for me, where we sell, where we create money, that's the global market, and there we have 20 billion litres of milk from New Zealand on 400 billion. That's 5%, right? So at the farm gate, we are really trying to do the best possible job we can. Did we have our forecast wrong? Yes, we did our forecast wrong. But last year, you also remember we said 5.25 plus or minus $1.5. That's how uncertain I was about the forecast.
You weren't alone in having your forecast wrong. If we go back to the end of 2014, the Prime Minister was saying, the dip is over, it's going to swing back up. Have the politics of this, have the dependency, the broader, wider dependency on the dairy industry in New Zealand not served you well? In other words, have a lot of people hitched their cart to your horse?
Yeah, I cannot judge what other people have decided.
That's a politic answer.
But John, what I do know is that when you look at the fundamentals of supply and demand, and then I mean consumer, right? And consumer, if that 400 billion wheel keeps on growing by 3%, that's 12 billion litres more of milk every year, right? That needs to come from somewhere. So the world of dairy is a positive scene. And if you ask me the long-term perspective, should we look at the milk price in New Zealand context of a price around 6? Absolutely. That's where the price should sit. But we are looking at big ups. Yeah, we had 8.5, and downs because it's a shallow market.
It's so confusing. I mean, let's look at your outlook today. So there is a sense now that later this year things will start to rebound, although by golly, everyone has heard that before. But then at the bottom of your presentation today on the outlook page is one line. Either a supply or demand shock could significantly change this outlook.
That's correct.
In other words, you're reading the tea leaves, aren't you?
No, well, you should read it. What we're saying and what our scenario is, John, here is we are saying prices are lifting from where they are now, below 2,000. Intervention levels in Europe are 2,200. That's an unsustainable level where New Zealand is at. We are saying it will lift and it will go to 2,500, but not to the levels we were before. For that next step, you need a shock. Yeah, you need a weather event in one of the pools, which normally happens once every 2 years, or you need a market correction, that the sanctions are lifted in Russia or Iran. Iran has opened up. What does that mean for demand? We know we have signals, but that could be a big opportunity. So if you have an opportunity in demand and you have an issue in supply, which is normally happens once every 2 years, the thing or the whole market will shift around.
Okay, Tony,
because it's shallow.
Can we keep you here? Because I do want to talk about debt reduction and Fonterra and how you're going to achieve that, as well as protecting farmers and your shareholders. But Katrina's here to do the news headlines. We're 4 minutes late for them because of Brussels. The whole show's running late today.
Okay.
Would you mind just staying for 2 minutes?
No problem.
Here's Katrina Batten with the news headlines.
Belgian authorities have been carrying out raids hunting for a man believed to be behind the attacks that left more than 30 people dead and more than 200 injured. The Belgian Prime Minister, Charles Michel, says searches are taking place in several parts of the country. 3 days of mourning have been declared in Belgium. In the United States, the Republican Party's presidential frontrunner Donald Trump is calling for America to go back to using torture, such as waterboarding and other harsh interrogation techniques when questioning terror suspects. Meanwhile, in the presidential race, Mr. Trump and the Democratic Party frontrunner Hillary Clinton have swept to victory in the latest primary vote in the state of Arizona. The Prime Minister John Campbell says Fonterra's strong results shows it can pay for goods and services on time. The country's largest company made $409 million in the 6 months to the end of January, an increase of more than 120%. It comes after it controversially extended from 30 days to 90 the time it takes to pay its bills. The Auckland arborist who staged a protest up a Kauri tree has been sentenced for trespassing and ordered to pay reparation of $1,000 to the owners of the land the tree is on. A study by the Institute of Economic Research suggests nearly half of New Zealand's jobs are under threat of being replaced by technology within the next 20 years. The Auckland City Mission says it's facing a hole of $100,000 in its funding because of unprecedented demand for food parcels. And the Rugby Sevens tournament is set to stay in the capital. RNZ News has been told Wellington will keep the Sevens, although the decision has not been confirmed by the New Zealand Rugby Union or the City Council. I'll be back at 6 o'clock with more news, sport and weather.
Thanks very much, Katrina. Coming up, the man who sent anonymous letters to Fonterra and federated farmers threatening the release of 1080 contaminated infant formula, sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. Plus, mystery surrounding an accident in the Auckland suburb of Newmarket, which saw a car plunged from a 5-storey parking building, and Wellington does keep the Sevens tournament. All of that coming up. Teo Sperrings is still with us in the studio. Thank you for staying, Teo. Let's look at your debt reductions. Actually, can we talk? John Campbell saying, pay your contractors on time. Now, this is the Prime Minister having a go at you. How do you feel about that?
We are paying our contractors on time.
How do you feel about the Prime Minister having a go at you? How do you feel about actually the fact that National Party MPs have been speaking up on behalf of the contractors in these communities? Are you now a bit of a political football?
I think Fonterra, there's always opinions around Fonterra, but two things are very clear for me, or very important to me. Pay on time, and we are paying on time. I just heard here as well that the news is that we are to 90 days. That's actually untrue. It's 60.
It's 60 over and above what it was, right? Which can mean that actually effectively it becomes 90 days, doesn't it, Teo?
Yeah, but what it is, John, it is a policy which was approved in 2011, not consistently being executed, putting us on a level playing field where we need to compete with other players in the world.
And if you're a plumber in Hawera, or a Sparky in Stratford who does work for Fonterra, and in fact, because you are a virtual monopoly in New Zealand and you want to work in the dairy industry, you're the guys in town. Do they want to be on a level playing field with a Dutch or a Chinese dairy company?
But 85% of the New Zealand suppliers are untouched. So the examples you give, they're untouched.
If they do more than $100,000 work a year for Fonterra, then they're touched?
Yes.
Which is actually not that much money, is it?
No, but if you want to put yourself on a level playing field, we are far away from market. We start at $150 per ton negative. If we don't put ourselves on a level playing field, we lose competitiveness. And if we lose competitiveness, we can't bring the dollars back home to New Zealand, which are being spent in the communities.
Are you looking over your shoulder here? Who are you worried about? Is it Standard & Poor's? Who are you worried about?
No, I'm worried about real dairy competition in the global arena. It's tight. It's very difficult at the moment to really keep your order books filled. Our result today, with a strong growth of ingredients and consumer food service, and create massively more value, which is brought back to New Zealand, spent in the communities, that's what it is about. But if we don't have a level playing field, it's going to be difficult.
Okay, let's talk about your debt reduction plan. So it's gone from, 51 point something percent to 49%. You're saying you can... Gearing. You're saying you can reduce it to further to between 40 and 45% this financial year. How is that remotely possible?
No, that is going to happen. Because the biggest factor here is that we are at the back end of the season, so we receive less and less milk, to almost zero in May. So our payables go down, or to our farmers go down, because we don't receive milk, and we sell on quite a square pattern around the world, because customers want to have stock products 12 months a year, right? So we sell a lot of milk. We don't receive any milk because of the back end of the season. So we normally, second half, we drop by 5%.
So doesn't that mean that's a cyclical gearing reduction? And in other words, come the peak season again, it will go back up. That's right. So it's not a meaningful achievement, is it really? No, it's just cyclical, isn't it?
It is. If you compare with 31st of January last year, then it's a 1.5% drop. And we have financed our Being Made deal in that time period. We have done all our big capital investments for the future. We have paid more dividend, right? So we had a whole lot more spent, and a 1.5% drop, and that's going to drop back into the 40 to 45% bracket. And that's our forecast. That's what we have put out there, and that's our firm belief. That's our,
You are the largest dairy company in the world, right? Fonterra.
Yeah, in terms of litres.
In terms of litres. What percentage of your business is done overseas?
95%.
So 5% of your business is done in New Zealand, but New Zealanders have an enormous amount invested in you, literally, metaphorically, in every possible way. $38 billion worth of farm debt. Fonterra has another $7 billion worth of debt. We're talking $45 billion worth of debt all up. This country has invested in Fonterra. We have livelihoods, we have farms, we have farmers going to the wall. What is your priority? What do you stand for? What do you want most of all?
Look, we are by nature an exporter, so we are the biggest provider of dairy in the world, and we need to make a difference in the lives of our consumers, because if we don't make a difference there, we don't create value, and we don't bring that value back home. So for me, it's about value creation offshore. We have to, because that's our massive ship goes offshore. We create value, we bring the dollars back home, and we share that, of course, with our shareholders first, but that goes back to the communities. And if we really stop growing, or we lose scale and we lose competitiveness, then we become less relevant in the world. We struggle. And second point for me is our sustainability program, because people think, with this discussion, that we don't care. We do care. We have milk for schools for 170,000 children. We have adopted 6 catchments in New Zealand through DOC. We have fenced 25,000. You know my passion there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have not cut a cent there.
Okay.
Not cut a cent.
Now, look, people, lots of feedback coming in saying, hey, how come milk prices have fallen, right? So what farmers have been paying for milk has fallen, but when I go to the supermarket, it hasn't fallen at all. And I noted your gross margins were up from 15 to 21%, right? Ka-ching. So in other words, cheaper milk benefits you because you can maximise profit on it. Why haven't we seen comparable reductions at the retail end?
Look, you've seen amendments again, but what we had this discussion before, for me it's important to see that consumption in New Zealand grows, per capita, and it was dropping, and it's growing right now.
Are you answering my question? Are you profiteering? Are you making hay while the sun shines at the expense of your retail clients?
John, it is important that we cannot price products in supermarkets, and we don't price the products in supermarkets in the first place, they do that themselves, but if we go on a highly volatile curve with consumer pricing, we lose any belief of consumers. So when the prices are high, you didn't see us lifting the price. We price what the market can bear, and that is supply and demand again. So and the price, let's be honest, I mean, it was around the $4.50 for 2 liters of Anchor. We are now closer to $3.50. That's a big difference.
Okay.
And we supply 170,000 children with milk every day for free.
If you are one of those farmers who are now considering the 10%, more than 10%, that Federated Farmers reveal are now under pressure from their banks over their mortgage?
We do everything on the second box what I was talking about, what we can control to have as strong as possible co-op supporting them.
What can you tell them that isn't romantic and hopeful, but is true and realistic about what Fonterra can do for them?
What you've seen today with the 390, yeah, we have done this season 30 plus 40, 30 cents support, 40 cents of dividend, right? We have Farm Source, our stores, we will come out next week with significant support and discounts traveling back to farmers. So every stone we see, we turn, yeah, and that money goes back to support farmers. And we have good conversation with the banks, to what extent the banks can help, yeah, in the best possible way and as low as possible cost.
Taz Spearings, the CEO of Fonterra, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Katrina Batten, who's been sitting patiently there waiting for us to finish. Thank you.
Thank you.
Both. We're going to Giles Beckford in Wellington now. We're going to Giles Beckford, our business editor, who's going to join us live from Wellington. Giles, were you listening into that?
I was indeed, and I thought that one of the principal commodities that Fonterra may be engaging in now is fudge, because frankly there's a lot of fudge about the results that we've got. This was a result presentation, I think, essentially with a message aimed at farmers and farmer suppliers. But some of the numbers are quite opaque, and from that point of view, you'd have to say that Fonterra has a lot of challenges ahead of it to maximise those earnings. Interesting that Taz Spearings should talk about the $600 million from, as he put it, the earnings before interest and tax for the ingredients business. This is the whole milk powder, the basic commodities. But that actually then means that there's not much left over from their total EBIT number of around 700 million from the added value, the high margin material. And you've got to say, well, you know, there's obviously a lot more there to be done by the company in order to maximise this. This is the yogurts, the UHT milk, the cheese, the stuff that actually really sells for big dollars overseas. And that's what they clearly have to do, but we haven't, you know, I think it's still really unclear how much progress they're making. And I have to say that, you know, I don't think that Taz Spearings' comment on the debt reduction, it wasn't really convincing. As you rightly put it, it's largely a cyclical response. Right? It will rise again. He's best, I think, at best he's saying, we're not going to be spending big bucks on big factories anymore, and there won't be any big investments overseas. And from that point of view, we won't be spending as much, and that should help. And it surely will, but you know, there's still pressures clearly within the business.
Gosh, it's fascinating, isn't it? That balancing act also, that if the milk is cheaper, it's actually better for margins, it's better for Fonterra's costs, it's a disaster for farmers. Farmers are their shareholders. I think I think lots of townies are only just sort of coming to grips with that strange conundrum, really, aren't they?
I think they are. I mean, on a very superficial level, it's the supermarket price of milk which hits home for people. Why isn't it cheaper, as people have been texting and asking us? But it's the inherent contradiction within the Fonterra structure. On the one hand, the farmers are the suppliers, and therefore they want the best price possible. And as we were discussing the other day, on the other hand, they're the shareholders. They want the best return, the best dividend possible. And at some stage, perhaps Fonterra shareholders have to sit down and have to ask themselves again, are we in the best possible structure to either do ourselves proud as farmers, or do we want to be investors in a dairy company? You ask, who are the big ones in the world? Who are the competitors? Nestle, Lactalis, Danone. Fonterra is the fourth biggest dairy company in the world by way of turnover. And I have to say the improvements in its margins were as good as any of those companies achieved in the past year.
Giles, markets quickly before you go.
Fonterra, its share price, the shareholders fund, the one that's based on dividends, that went down 5 cents, 5.88. So the market wasn't all that, it wasn't fazed by it at all. Our own top 50 index up 6 points at 66.70, and the New Zealand dollar holding pretty steady at 67.3 US and 88.3 Australian.
Giles Beckford, our business editor. Thanks so much, Giles. Jeremy Kerr's letters threatening babies around the world have cost New Zealand businesses and agencies $37 million. Today, Kerr was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison at the High Court in Auckland for sending anonymous letters to both Fonterra and Federated Farmers threatening to release 1080 contaminated infant milk formula into the market. He'd earlier pleaded guilty to the charges of blackmail. Our Auckland court reporter Edward Gay was in court and filed this report.
Justice Venning read out the letters from Jeremy Kerr, which sparked intensive testing of all infant formula.
Enclosed is a sample of 1080 blended with New Zealand dairy infant formula currently in China. If after the 27th March...
The 60-year-old owned a 1080 alternative and sent the threatening letters to Fonterra and Federated Farmers in an effort to put pressure on the government to ban the poison and make his product more popular. Fonterra's manager of people, culture and strategy, Maury Leland, told the court Kerr's letter was a direct threat to the company, farmers' incomes, and more importantly, a threat to babies around the world.
It is important to remember what a catastrophic impact this blackmail threat could have had on the lives of innocent children. While the words of the letter carried terrible threats, it cannot be forgotten that it was accompanied by a deadly quantity of 1080 mixed with milk powder.
She said as a result of the threat, Fonterra instigated stringent security and testing regimes. Federated Farmers Chief Executive Graham Smith told the court Kerr's letter was a direct attack on the fabric of society.
The 1080 threat had the potential to devastate our ability to successfully operate within these markets and would have cost the country billions of dollars. Customers would have stopped buying and using our products due to their immediate safety concerns.
He said there was a real risk that New Zealand's food products could have been banned from international markets, and with the country's reliance on primary industries, there was a potential threat to all sectors of New Zealand. The Crown Prosecutor Christine Gordon QC asked for a starting point of the maximum 14 years in prison because of the nature of the threat, the $37 million cost, and the fact that Kerr's motivation was money. Kerr's lawyer John Billington QC reminded the court that his client never acted on the threat and even wrote to police to withdraw the threat. A DNA test of the envelope linked Kerr to the crime. Mr Billington said his client only stood to gain a modest $10,000 to $30,000 from a 1080 ban, but there was no rational explanation for Kerr's irrational behaviour. In sentencing, Justice Venning said Kerr's threat sparked a 10-month-long police investigation and caused officers to speak to 2,600 people who had voiced strong opinions about 1080.
Mr Kerr, I regard the blackmail threats you made in this case as particularly serious. The nature of the threat itself to poison infant formula was given credibility by your enclosing fatal doses of 1080 poison with the letters.
The judge said there was enough 1080 poison to be fatal to between 13 and 33 infants. Justice Venning took time off the sentence for Kerr's early guilty plea and declined an application from the Crown for a minimum non-parole period of up to 2/3 of the sentence. For Checkpoint, Edward Gay.
It's 8 minutes to 6. A woman is in critical condition after the car she was in with a man ploughed through metal railings on the 5th storey of an Auckland parking building and plunged to the ground. The car fell onto its roof and onto a parked vehicle on York Street, which is in Newmarket, just outside the central city, just before 9 last night. Our reporter Carla Penman was at the scene and has told us what happened.
Well, a couple, a man and a woman, one 30, one 39, were in their car on this story, which is 5 stories up just off York Street in Newmarket. And all that we know really is that they plummeted through this railing just here in front of me. It's been cleanly wiped out, and the car was seen by witnesses plummeting 5 stories below me, which is quite a drop from what I can see, and pancaking down at the bottom. And we understand witnesses who did see this say that they heard a screeching noise of tyres, and just before it landed on the ground, a bar manager who was just up the road said that she saw it mid-air and turning and landing on its roof onto a parked car, which we know no one was inside of that car.
Carla, so in order for there to be screeching, in order to get through the barrier, there was clearly acceleration that got it over the edge. Did the police understand the circumstances in which this occurred?
Well, the police haven't said much today, aside from updating us on the condition of the pair. So at this stage, it's kind of just theories that are being thrown about by some of the witnesses that I've spoken to. Some are saying that perhaps there was burnouts being done for it to have reached such a high speed to have knocked the barrier completely out as it has done. Others just think that maybe the barrier could be faulty. So we're still waiting for the police to give us some more information, but at this stage all we can say is that a 30-year-old woman is fighting for her life in hospital in a critical condition, and a 39-year-old man is in a stable but serious condition.
Carla Penman from right beside where the car went over on the top of the parking building in Newmarket in Auckland. Well, gosh, what a run the women and the men are having at the T20 World Cup in India. New Zealand's men cricketers, the Black Caps, have confirmed their place in the semis by defeating Pakistan by 22 runs in Mohali early this morning. That takes their tournament record to 3 from 3, of course. But the Black Caps opener, Martin Guptill, says the side still has plenty to improve on. Reminds me of you and Chatfield, who always used to say that, bless him. Guptill, who top scored with 80 runs, says the team wasn't happy with its opening bowling performance, something they'll spend the next few days trying to improve before their final group match, which is against Bangladesh.
We didn't bowl particularly well up front today, I didn't think, and we were able to pull it back through some tight bowling and some good fielding. So, the boys are pretty happy at the moment. We've got another game in a couple of days' time to come out and work on the things we didn't do so well and put them right.
Lovely modesty. We're joined now by sports reporter Barry Guy. Barry, boy, oh boy. I tell you what, the Pakistanis went after us and got off to such a flying start that they looked to have it. But for me, the feature of this team is how composed and focused they are. They're unflappable at the moment.
Yes, Martin Guptill was probably being a little bit harsh there when he said they didn't bowl particularly well, because this is T20 and, the batsmen just go for it. But again, it was the spinners that brought them back into the game. And I wonder whether, because they opened with the seamers today, whether perhaps there is an opportunity again for opening with the slow bowlers at some stage. But it's hard to be critical of anything. No. Again, it was very impressive that they managed to win in a different way today, the Black Caps. They scored 180-something, which was their best score so far in the tournament, and then they defended it well with the slow bowlers and in the field.
Yeah, let's talk about Martin Guptill himself. Gosh, he's a magnificent batsman when he's seeing that ball like that.
Yeah, criticised heavily over the summer in the longest form of the game in Test cricket, but this is really where he's at. There have been suggestions that everyone's scratching their head, why hasn't he been picked up for an IPL team? He is playing in the Caribbean League, but he is so dangerous. Again, it can come off. What was the game last time that he hit a boundary and then went out? But that's the nature of the game. And, when he's on song, 80 off 42 was it today? Yeah. And, just marvellous.
Yeah, I remember Nathan Astle, after he scored that beautiful double time against England, saying he was seeing it like a beach ball. And I thought Guptill looked a bit like that. Who are we going to play in the semi-finals?
Yeah, it's a tough one really, because the other group is wide open. The West Indies, the only team 2 from 2. We've got South Africa, England and Sri Lanka, and some key games coming up in the other group. I think the big one is tomorrow night. That's, who is it? It's the West Indies, I think. No, England against South Africa, something like that. So that's a long way from being decided, that group. Perhaps the West Indies looking the strongest there at this stage. But, there's too many others to choose from. OK, and so suddenly it becomes sudden death.
And if we remember back to the World Cup, the one-day World Cup, which was what, last year? Was it last year or the year before? Anyway. There we were playing beautifully, and then we got into the final and the occasion was so big. Australia were playing at home. Do you think this team has the resilience and the resolve to be able to go through sudden death?
Yes. Well, again, it's T20 though, and you just need a little bit of luck to go your way or not your way, and all of a sudden the game completely swings. In 50 overs, that isn't so much of a factor, and perhaps Australia was the better side last year. In Test cricket, of course, you can come back over 5 days, but this is so fickle. But you'd have to say that the way they're playing and the sort of the confidence that they have in each other, that as long as they continue that confidence and take it into the playoffs, then they can go all the way. Yes, for sure.
Now, Barry, I don't quite know what's going on here, but I've got to know, you've just got back from the Hurricanes, some kind of Hurricanes media conference, and All Blacks wing Julian Savea hasn't been selected for their Super Rugby game against the Southern Kings on Friday night. What's going on there?
Well, it's possibly quite obvious for a few of us watching the game that he's not in the best condition that he was last year since the World Cup, and Coach Chris Boyd said the decision to leave him out is to give other players the opportunity, but after we grilled him for about 10 minutes he did concede that perhaps Julian has a long way to go. He is on a separate fitness training program with their fitness guru, and that perhaps having this week off and also the bye next week will allow him to get back to his best, which he's obviously not showing at the moment.
OK, so is he publicly being punished here? Is he being singled out as a naughty boy because he's unfit, out of condition and not contributing all he can?
No. Chris Boyd went to great lengths to say there's no hidden agendas, no smoke screens. He's not being punished in any way. He's done nothing away from the game that's affected him in any way. They just want to give him the best opportunity. He did say also that perhaps it is tough for some players after the World Cup to have the summer off and get back in the best possible condition. So, yeah, no, just a week off for him.
Those pips, they're brutal. Once the pips start, it's all over. Thanks, Barry Guy. You're listening to Checkpoint. Thank you for joining us, everyone. It's 6 o'clock. I'm John Campbell on behalf of the team. Lovely to have you with us. We've got half an hour to go. We are going live to Belgium after the news at 6 with Katrina. Farmers react to Fonterra doubling its profit. What does it mean for them in real terms? A new study suggests nearly half of our jobs are under threat of being replaced by technology within the next 20 years. And the Hamilton cat is a change of pace who is stealing men's knickers. Stop it, you naughty cat. But first, here's the news with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Mourners in Brussels have kept an all-night vigil at a makeshift memorial in the Place de la Bourse, a square in the ancient heart of the city. Terror bomb attacks on the city's main airport and a metro train yesterday left more than 30 people dead and dozens injured. Earlier, the Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel joined the vigil as night fell, saying Belgium would not be cowed by the attacks.
I would like to tell you, this time, this tragic moment, this black moment in our country, and never before I would like to call on everybody to show calmness and solidarity.
The translated words of the Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel. The chief executive of Fonterra, Theo Spearings, is expecting higher prices for dairy products because of rising global demand. The country's biggest company more than doubled its profit to $409 million in the 6 months to January and signalled it'll pay a dividend of 40 cents a share earlier than normal. Mr Spearings told John Campbell the supply glut and weak demand in China and Russia means prices will remain muted in the short term, but he's optimistic that will turn around.
When you look at the fundamentals of supply and demand, and then I mean consumer, right? And consumer, if that 400 billion wheel keeps on growing by 3%, that's 12 billion litres more of milk every year, right? That needs to come from somewhere. So the world of dairy is a positive scene.
Theo Spearings of Fonterra. The Auckland arborist who staged a protest up a kauri tree has been sentenced for trespassing and ordered to pay reparation to the owners of the land the tree is on. John O. Smith spent 13 days in the canopy of the kauri in Titirangi last December. He pleaded guilty in January and was sentenced in the Waitakere District Court this afternoon to pay the landowners $1,000. He says he's stoked the sentence isn't more severe.
There was a possibility of, John Lenihan wanted $20,000 worth of reparations out of me. There was a possibility of 3 months imprisonment. The judge took everything into account, the reasons why I was up there, the awareness that I generated, I'm just stoked with the result, actually.
John O. Smith says the sentence won't deter him from similar protests in the future. President Barack Obama has ended his historic visit to Cuba. In a speech broadcast live on national television, he urged Cubans to embrace change and to look at the future with hope. The BBC's Will Grant reports.
For so long, Cubans were told that their biggest enemy was the President of the United States. So to see him address them live on state television must have felt like true change had already come to the island. President Obama didn't waste his opportunity either. He began by saying he'd come to Cuba to bury the remnants of the Cold War in the Americas, to rapturous applause. But it wasn't just about Washington's mistakes in the region. He didn't shy away from the uncomfortable issue of human rights in Cuba either. Citizens should be free to speak their mind without fear, to organise and criticise their government, he said.
Will Grant in Havana. Refugee advocates say asylum seekers on Nauru have staged their third protest in as many days. Ian Rintle of the Refugee Action Coalition says for some of those protesting, Good Friday will mark 1,000 days in detention on Nauru. He says 470 people are still waiting to have their applications for refugee status processed. In October, the Nauru government said it would finalise the claims of most of the asylum seekers on the island within a week. The Wellington charity, where a child sex offender volunteered, says it only found out about his conviction after reading about it in the paper. Vicente Caballes was sentenced to 6 months in jail for sexual conduct with a child. The St Vincent de Paul Society says it was shocked to learn of his background. A spokesperson, Elspeth Hymes-Hancock, says he was a volunteer from October 2014 to January this year, but was in a low-risk role sorting bric-a-brac and cleaning the shop. However, she says St Vincent's is looking at getting police checks to ensure there isn't a repeat.
We were very shocked and we were also very sad by hearing this news, obviously. It would actually be nice if it's possible to get this information from the police when it's happening, just so that we could have that awareness and know what's going on as well.
Elspeth Hymes-Hancock. Last year, the Wellington Mayor presented Caballes with a Society Award for his work. In sport, the Black Caps opener Martin Guptill says their ability to read and then play on the varying Indian pitches has been vital to their success so far at the 2020 Cricket World Cup. New Zealand became the first team to qualify for the semi-finals with a 22-run victory over Pakistan this morning, their third straight win. Guptill, who top scored with 80, believes they've made accurate pitch assessments and picked the right players for each of their games so far.
The way we're approaching it is going one game at a time, and we've played on two similar surfaces in Nopur and Dharamshala, and here we got on a better wicket, and we could be confronted with something completely different again in Kolkata. I think that's what we've been able to do pretty well, is assess early what sort of total we can get through to and be able to defend that.
Martin Guptill. The men's world tennis number one, Novak Djokovic, has apologised for suggesting the top men's players should be paid more than women. Earlier this week, he said he felt the men's tour should fight for more money because their matches drew more spectators. The Brisbane Broncos coach Wayne Bennett has reportedly re-signed with the National Rugby League in a deal worth $2 million that will keep him at the club until the end of the 2019 season. And Wales football manager Chris Coleman says Euro 2016 should go ahead as planned, despite heightened security fears following the Brussels attacks. He says it's what the people want and it should happen. That's the news.
Shock. Our Prime Minister, Charles Michel, said we will not capitulate to violence. We will preserve our liberties, our values, our democracy against these murderous barbarians.
Fear.
I just jumped on top of my partner and covered us with the suitcase to protect us from the falling ceiling.
Terror.
We are living in a time where there is a global jihadist insurgency. The security services are overwhelmed across Europe, in the UK, and I would say around the world as well.
Live breaking news. Guy Aspinall and Susie Ferguson. Morning reports, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, the 3D artist who is recreating ancient artefacts destroyed by ISIS. And after 10, psychologist Daniel Casasanto, who's researched whether left or right-handedness could influence your politics, and the do's and don'ts for parents of young athletes going into winter sport. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather now through to midnight tomorrow, and there's a severe weather warning for northern and western parts of New Zealand. The Upper North Island, that's from Taranaki across to Taupo and Bay of Plenty northwards. Rain with heavy falls spreading from the north later today or overnight. A risk of thunderstorms and localised downpours tomorrow, easing from the west. Northeast gales today, severe in exposed places, easing tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered rain in Gisborne, spreading south overnight, rain becoming widespread and heavier tomorrow afternoon. Whanganui to Wellington, also wide at upper, a few spots of rain becoming widespread and heavier overnight, then easing to showers and fine breaks tomorrow morning, northerly gales overnight. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland, rain with heavy falls, possible downpours easing tomorrow. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, scattered showers, some possibly heavy with hail in Canterbury tomorrow afternoon, clearing Southland and Otago later, and the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's almost 9 minutes past 6.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Coming up in the next half hour, lots and lots of things. We are going to go live to Brussels. We're going to get more reaction about what's happened there. We're going to hear from a farmer reacting to the Fonterra result today, and we're also going to have a little bit of escapist fun. Let's look at the reaction of world leaders who have condemned the terror attacks in Belgium, which killed at least 30 people and injured hundreds more during morning rush hour in Brussels. Bomb blasts at the airport and a metro station in Brussels were carried out by Islamic State, and it's warning worse is to come for, quote, crusader states allied against it. A manhunt is underway for one suspect Belgian police believe survived the bombings. In a moment, we'll cross live to our reporter Jack Parrick in Brussels. But first, Alex Ashton on Belgium's Day of Terror and the world's response.
The eyes of the world are on one man. Captured on CCTV footage inside Zaventem Airport, the man's accompanied by two others. He wears a white jacket and black hat as he pushes an airport trolley.
A photograph of 3 male suspects was taken at Zaventem. 2 of them seem to have committed suicide attacks. The third, wearing a light-coloured jacket and a hat, is actively being sought.
The airport blast killed at least 11, injured 100, and sent hundreds fleeing for their lives. Just an hour later, a second attack. Another bomb went off at the Maalbeek metro station, killing 20 more and injuring more than 130.
I'm so scared. I feel like it's the end of the world.
This woman fled the airport running along the motorway. She was in an airport bathroom.
I heard an explosion and all the ceilings is going down. And then I just go under the sink, and then the second explosion went, and then everything is black.
As Belgian police continued their manhunt for the suspect in the white jacket, French President François Hollande spoke about the link to the Paris terror attacks last November, which killed 130.
We need to realise the extent and gravity of this terrorist threat. These attacks follow others. Paris was particularly targeted last year.
World leaders joined the chorus condemning ISIS, who overnight claimed responsibility. Speaking from Cuba, US President Barack Obama vowed to help Belgium bring those responsible to justice.
And this is yet another reminder that the world must unite. We must be together, regardless of nationality or race or faith, in fighting against the scourge of terrorism. We can and we will defeat those who threaten the safety and security of people all around the world.
The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, David Cameron, says extra police were brought in to patrol key transport hubs.
I've chaired a meeting of Cobra here in London to make sure that we're doing everything we can to enhance our own security, and there'll be increased police presence at ports, airports, underground stations and international railway stations, as you'd expect. But these are difficult times, these are appalling terrorists, but we must stand together to do everything we can to stop them and to make sure that although they attack our way of life and they attack us because of who we are, we will never let them win.
Meanwhile, at the Greece-Macedonia border, more than 12,000 refugees stranded in no man's land expressed their sympathy for the victims of the Brussels attacks. Children, mainly from Syria, Iraq, Pakistan and Afghanistan, stood with handmade signs written with English slogans, which read, "I hate ISIS" and "Sorry for Brussels." The Syrian refugee said he knew what the people of Brussels were going through.
Everybody here, they feel sorry about what happened in Brussels. You know, we left our countries, our hometowns because of the same reason, because of ISIS, because of the suicide bombers.
As night fell in Brussels, Belgians gathered in Place de la Bourse Square to pay tribute to the victims of the early morning terror attacks.
It honestly really hasn't sank in yet for me personally, because I never really believed that something could happen here in Brussels, but yeah, it's clearly here.
It's a sad day for us. Brussels is a fantastic place, and I don't want anyone to destroy this beauty that we live with here.
In Paris, City Hall was decked with Belgian flags and a moment of silence was held for the victims. The Eiffel Tower was lit in the colours of Belgium's flag, black, yellow and red, and in Germany, the famous Brandenburg Gate a long-time symbol of European peace and unity, was also lit up in Belgium's colours. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
Let's go live to Brussels now. They're exactly 12 hours behind us, so it's morning there. Jack Parrick is our correspondent, and he's been to the scenes of the attacks yesterday and joins us now via Skype. Jack, thanks for being with us, particularly so early in the morning. What is your sense of how Brussels and Belgium are going to react to this?
Well, at the moment, there's an outpouring of sympathy, obviously, for the victims. That's the first reaction from everyone, but also there are major concerns about why this attack was allowed to happen. We heard from one of the mayors of Brussels, the Interior Minister, saying after the arrest of Salah Abdeslam, he was the Paris attacker that was caught in Brussels on Friday. We heard that they had good information about, credible information about a potential attack on the city of Brussels. And then yesterday, one of the mayors of Brussels came out and said that they were surprised by the scale of the attack. So it appears that they obviously weren't ready and that their intelligence potentially might not have been good enough to have prevented an attack of this nature. There is a lot of condemnation of the Brussels security forces probably about to come. At the moment, we've seen a widespread operation in the Schaerbeek area of Brussels, which is between the metro station that was hit by these terror attacks and the airport where the first set of explosions took place. A massive perimeter was set up by police and they were raiding houses. They found another bomb, some chemical products as they're being called, and a flag of the Islamic State in one of those properties. But at the moment, it doesn't appear that they've found one man that they're hunting for. A missing man who is, a picture of him is circulating, has been circulated by police. He was at the airport, but his explosive device appears to have not exploded, and he is on the run still.
Jack, one of the theories about the way ISIS works is that by doing something like this, they create Islamophobia. Islamophobia alienates people in the Muslim community, it vilifies them, and therefore makes them prone to radicalisation. How can that be prevented, particularly given the rise of far-right politics in Europe and the kind of anti-Muslim sentiment that's accompanying that?
Well, this is one of the major concerns here in Brussels and Belgium as a whole. It's a country divided by two significant language districts, the Dutch-speaking language district of Flanders and the Wallonian French-speaking part of this country, and there's a strong divide between those two areas. And the society in this country has been accused regularly of lack of integration, especially of their Muslim populations and communities. And areas of the city of Brussels have been heavily criticised for being unable to integrate those Muslim communities into the rest of society, while the two populations of language districts in Belgium are at odds with one another. So there will be calls on politicians to try to do more to increase integration here, because the two attacks now that have been claimed by the Islamic State group have been conducted either in Brussels or orchestrated and managed from Brussels. That's the Paris attacks that happened back on November the 13th. We expect, I think, that these, as we find out more details about the attacks that shook this city yesterday, that we will find out that the people that are involved probably came from Brussels or have lived or spent some time in this city.
Jack Parrick, thank you so much, Jack. We really appreciate it. Jack Parrick, who is joining us live via Skype from Brussels. It's 6:17, returning now to Fonterra and its bumper profit, one which the Prime Minister John Campbell says shows the country's largest company can pay its suppliers on time. Fonterra, the world's largest dairy exporter by volume, made a half-year profit of $409 million, an increase of more than 120%, and it will pay a dividend of 40 cents a share, half of it earlier than normal, to support cash-strapped farmers. In a bid to keep a lid on costs, late last year, Fonterra extended from 30 days to up to 90 the time it took to pay firms and asked some to cut their charges by 10%, sparking a backlash from suppliers. Earlier on the programme, I asked Fonterra CEO Tao Spearings if John Campbell's comments about this showed the company is becoming something of a political football.
Fonterra, there's always opinions around Fonterra, but two things are very clear for me. or very important to me, pay on time, and we are paying on time. I just heard here as well that the news is that we are to 90 days. That's actually untrue. It's 60.
It's 60 over and above what it was, right? Which can mean that actually effectively it becomes 90 days, doesn't it, Teo?
Yeah, but what it is, John, it is a policy which was approved in 2011, not consistently being executed, putting us on a level playing field where we need to compete with other players in the world.
Teo Spearings. Alan Crouch is a Fonterra shareholder in North Waikato. He milks 500 cows. He told reporter Sharon Brett Kelly that the higher dividend payout means that he might break even, but it doesn't mean he can start spending money.
It certainly doesn't take the worry away from it. It eases it a bit, but then we were expecting a reasonably good dividend. We've been prudent all the way along in terms of our expenditure, so it does ease it a little bit, but, it's the overall package, the overall picture of our business. And I know we do run a different system than a lot of other people, so we are lucky we don't have that high debt structure, that high farm operating costs. And if I did, I'll still be quite concerned.
There's also been a lot of criticism of Fonterra and the way it's handled things through this difficult period. How do you feel about the way Fonterra's been handling things?
Yeah, I haven't been happy with the way they've been handling things for a couple of years. When you get an $8.40 milk price like a couple of years ago, it's sort of masked a bit, but I've always been a bit concerned about the direction they've been going in some areas. A little bit of the communication hasn't been very good. You sort of wonder whether they've got the support of farmers at the ground level behind them and everybody's going in the same direction. Yeah, not that happy with the overall performance or the communication and things like that of the company.
Today, John Wilson, the chairman, and Teo Spearings, the chief executive, both said that they think things are going to pick up, that the global situation, the flood of milk on the market is going to ease, and that the milk price will pick up in the second half of the year. Do you feel the same? Do you believe that?
No, I don't believe that. I've been in the industry for 30 years, and we've been hearing things are going to be better next year for many seasons. If you look at the dynamics of the supply and demand, I just don't believe it. The only benefit I can see for next year is I think there'll be a currency gain. Whether that's going to be transpired into an improvement in the payout, time will tell. I don't think that the milk price will, that the whole milk powder or the GDT will actually go up a heck of a lot. There's still dynamics with oversupply, through Europe, the Americans, the demand side with China and Russia out of it. It's really still up in the air, a lot of those issues. So, from my point of view, I just look at it in terms of knowing roughly what I'm going to get, and I want an accurate picture. I don't want like a milk price that's glossed over that's good for the PR or good for the company image. I want a realistic price so that I know where I'm going to go for next season and just being able to budget on that. We can't control much outside our own gate as farmers, so we have to control what's inside our gate, in which we can have some sort of say in. And so I just like to have that accurate picture and know what exactly I'm going to get so that I can manage my business accordingly.
It's Waikato farmer Alan Crouch speaking with our reporter Sharon Brett Kelly. 6:22. A new study suggests nearly half of this country's jobs are under threat of being replaced by technology within the next 20 years. The report out today from the Institute of Economic Research says workers will not only have to say goodbye to the idea of a job for life, now having an occupation for life is becoming a thing of the past. Teresa Cowie spoke to some people who are looking at how to adapt their industries so they can stand the test of time.
The types of industries at greatest risk would be labourers, machine operators and drivers, and a group at a mid-range point of risk would be clerical and administrative workers, sales workers, technicians and trades.
And it's not just manual or unskilled work that's under threat.
If everyone could connect, business will flourish, jobs will be created, communities will thrive. All because of small business owners like Beth and a place in the cloud called Xero. Beth started on Xero.
Professions like accounting are having to find ways to stay relevant as DIY accounting software takes over large swathes of its work. Michael Fraser is from Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand. Dr. Fraser says some accounting firms are already restructuring their businesses, moving away from totting up receipts and moving towards advising on business strategy.
So they moved sort of to a value-based billing system and that value-based model. So it's not so much how many 6-minute units have been charged up.
So that's where you charge more to help someone with their business strategy rather than to help them with their GST receipts. Is that what you mean?
That's right. And only if it's effective business strategy. So if the organisation is going to grow and prosper, it's not whether you've spent half an hour or 6 days, it's what's the value that client's getting from it.
The NZIER says the increasing pace of technological progress and a longer life expectancy means people will have more jobs in their lifetime, and more than ever before, New Zealanders need to be prepared to change their occupations. Roman Rogers is a regional manager for Hudson Recruitment. He says the trend towards multiple careers is already happening.
We are aware of it and we can see it happening at an accelerated rate. It was first talked about back in the 90s. I think McKinsey brought out some research that talked about that in time to come, people would have multiple role types within multiple organisations. And at the time it was interesting research, but it's proven when we look through the lens of 2016 that the accuracy was quite staggering.
Roman Rogers says universities and parents will need to equip the future workers with the ability to keep on learning throughout their lifetime, so they're ready to adapt with the labour market. He says people will have to do more to arm themselves with new skills and be ready for the next job or career. For Checkpoint, Teresa Cowie.
Well, it's been a funny old day, so we're going to change the subject entirely and go to Hamilton, where a 6-year-old Tonkinese cat called Bridget is making a name for itself in a neighbourhood by stealing underpants. Not the first cat to do this, but Bridget has really been making a good go of it. Every night for the last 2 months, Bridget's been nabbing people's socks and undies, specifically men's ones, and bringing them home. We've got a photo of Bridget accompanied by one sock and a pair of knickers, looking very proud of herself. Now her owner, Sarah Nathan, is on a mission to reunite the undergarments with their rightful owner. And rightful owners, Sarah, welcome. So Bridget, every morning when you wake up, Bridget's got a little present of some undergarments.
Yep. Every morning there's a minimum of one, sometimes as much as 5 or 6 different pieces of underwear, socks. Yep. Either on my bed, in the hallway, yeah.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because we try to anthropomorphise and work out what the hell they're doing. Our cat did this for a very long time. She stopped, but there was a guy up the road. She was stealing his knickers, holus bolus. What is it, do you think? Is it a little present for you, a gift of appreciation, a donation to the household? What's it about?
Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's gifting and love. But the funny thing is, the last time it happened, we lived in another house, and it was about 2 months before we moved house, and we're about to move house again, and she started doing it again. So I'm starting to wonder if she's far more intelligent than we think she is.
Wow. I'm interested in the gender balance, because our female cat, neutered female cat, it has to be said, only was stealing men's knickers. Is your cat doing the same?
Yep. She's now you see, there's a point, because currently there's only women living in the house, and we came from a house. It's complicated, but there was 6 of us, 3 boys, 3 girls, and we're currently living with just the girls. Maybe she's just missing the boy smell.
Pining for some male company.
Yeah, it's very possible.
How extraordinary.
Because it can't be a coincidence, because it's only men's underwear, and clearly she would have access to all sorts of underwear.
Yes. Although it's not nearly as much fun stealing underwear from the house you're in. I mean, Bridget's clearly after an adventure. She wants to work the neighbourhood. So you are hoping to reunite these knickers with the poor chap or chaps who have lost them, are obviously feeling a bit bereft and wondering if there's a pervert in the community. So have you any idea who they belong to?
I think we might, because that's the way the whole thing started. Was I put a note in every letterbox and I got no response. And I'm sitting there on Friday night thinking, this is crazy. Someone's missing them. If we put And then I picked up the bag, didn't realise quite how much it was. I thought, right, we're getting a photo with this cat with his undies. If I share it with my friends on Facebook, someone's going to know someone. And then it's just gone, whoop, it's like it's all over the world. It's ridiculous. It's in, I did an interview with American TV today. But on some websites, some people were responding, and a guy said, hey, I live in O'Neill Street, which is the next street from us. Those are my socks. And someone in America said, oh, yeah. And then he took a photograph of his feet wearing 2 odd socks, which matched 2 odd socks in my photograph.
Brilliant.
So this happened on a global basis that I worked out. So there's a flat of blokes about, I don't know, 100, 200 metres from my house. Right. But so far they're not answering the door when I knock. I think they might be a bit embarrassed.
Well, they've got no socks, or they've got odd socks, and they're possibly going commando on the undies front. So they may be shy. Maybe you should just slide them through the letterbox. Excellent. So, excellent. Well, we're delighted to hear that the Nick is maybe going back. Isn't it funny? People, underpants. People love these stories, don't they? They love them. Sarah, yeah, cats and underpants. Throwing a shark. Thanks, Sarah Nathan. Joining us live from Hamilton, ending our program for this evening. Thank you for being with us tonight. It's been a big old program. Thank you for your feedback. There is lots of it, so we will bring you some of it tomorrow night because it's mostly about Fonterra, and that story will keep. See you tomorrow, I hope, at 5. Thanks very much indeed, and good night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Belgian police have issued a wanted notice for a suspect after bomb attacks in Brussels left more than 30 people dead. Fonterra's chief executive, Theo Spearings, is expecting higher prices for dairy products because of rising global demand. The Auckland arborist who protested up a Cody tree has been sentenced for trespassing in order to pay reparation. The Wellington charity, where a child sex offender volunteered, says it only found out about his conviction in a newspaper. Our next news and weather at 7.
Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm Elizabeth Brown. Tonight, Europe on high alert after terrorist strike in another of its capitals. 41 doctors in 5 years for the German pilot at the centre of the French Alps crash.